writing your book and you're kind of having this discourse with your readers, but it's broken up over space and time, but it's still co-creation, even if you never hear from your readers. Like you're participating in this meaning-making activity together. If these algorithms are getting really smart and really good, and they're actually producing high-quality things for specific use cases, that's pretty compelling.
Yeah, it's like customizing the model for the task, not these. This whole idea of general intelligence might just be a red herring. Like, no, we need specific models to do specific things.
I am a person who has a gift in writing, and I have a lot of training in writing. Writing is very painful for lots of people. Like, they don't feel confident about it, or they have, they're neurodivergent and it's a real struggle to get started, or people have dyslexia. I mean, there's all these kinds of reasons why writing is very hard. And I don't think it's the case that like we should be struggling through, making our own drafts just for the sake of the thing. But for me personally, I'm like, writing is mine. And
yeah, you should hammer it out on a typewriter with 2 fingers.
Chisel it in stone, think about every word. Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty attached to writing, but I don't think everybody has to be.
All right, welcome back to Invisible Machines. Rob, today we have a great conversation with the author of Conversations with Things, the Rosenfeld Media book, the co-author. Rebecca Evanhoe is on the show today. She wrote Conversations with Things along with Diana Diebel, who's not with us. We are only talking to Rebecca Evanhoe today. But this was a really interesting conversation because we got to dig into a lot of areas that we had sort of planned to talk about in terms of like anthropomorphizing design, and then also just kind of float into new areas that I feel like maybe we haven't even explored yet on this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I think with Rebecca, there's a kind of an ongoing conversation, sort of to be continued. There was a before, during, and it's great to kind of bring other people in on that. I think they'll be interested in her perspective.
Yeah, because we get to talk to her. We get a perspective kind of on conversational AI from, she's a conversational designer, but then she's also an author. Yeah. So we kind of get into what generative AI means in terms of writing and creating art. We kind of talk about it organizationally a bit. Yeah. We definitely outline some worst case scenarios.
Yeah, a pioneer for sure in this space, and kind of saw it from its like very rudimentary beginnings. Kind of interesting as it sort of evolves.
Yeah, and we should add too that she's a professor at Pratt as well, and she teaches courses on UX writing and conversational design. So really no better brain to pick about some of these really interesting topics. So I suppose we can just get right to the conversation if you want.
Let's do it. Yeah, all right. Sounds great. You and I had a conversation a while ago, and this was pre-ChatGPT, and you were telling me that you're like, the text's just not there. I think I'm just going to go write another book, like a fiction book, and I'm just going to wait for the technology to just catch up to where we are, because I'm tired of being being hamstrung by the tools we have, and I just don't think we're there. And I really loved that. I mean, I felt like you were kind of not willing to sign up for the kind of I would say the sort of facade of pretending that the technology was there to everybody, of overstating AI and where it is. And you're like, I'm gonna go where I don't have, where I don't feel pressure to overstate where we are, and I'm gonna come back when I can tell the truth. And I kind of love that. At the same time, I felt like I was also kind of indicating to you, without fully saying it, like, oh, I hope you write fast because it's coming. Like ChatGPT is around the corner.
Yeah.
Where did you net out? Did you is that what happened? Did you like have whiplash? Did you kind of flip back and then go, whoa, that.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I mean, I teach a course in conversation design at Pratt, and so I always have, even if I'm not taking on a lot of client work, or I was telling Josh earlier before the call that I've been working more on like creative projects with friends, which has been amazing. But yeah, I this semester all my students were like, "When are we going to talk about ChatGPT?" And I'm like, "It just came out last week. I don't have, I can't give you I can't give you really good content about it right now because it's new." So we just did a bunch of, played with it and talked about it in kind of an exploratory way. But yeah, I obviously ChatGPT is amazing. Like my boyfriend asked it to make a SWOT analysis. Do you know what a SWOT analysis is? Strengths,
Yeah, the whole
weaknesses,
4 by, yeah.
opportunities, and threats. It's like a discussion and thinking tool for analyzing opportunities. And he asked it to make a SWOT analysis for making your cat wear a hat. And it was epic. It was a perfect SWOT analysis. It was like strengths, your cat could look very cute in a hat. Opportunities, you could monetize pictures of your cat in the hat. Weaknesses, threats, your cat might resent you or even lash out at you if it doesn't want to wear the hat. It was like perfectly stunning, right? It is doing really stunning things.
Yeah.
But it's also not a conversation. It's like I want to take that and have more rules on top of it, right? Like it doesn't tell the truth. It just uses the most statistically common words for the thing, which is incredibly effective. But it, it the it's not how you're not really having a conversation with it in the same way. Like every time you ask it a question, it usually gives you like 3 paragraphs or something,
Yeah.
Right.
which isn't usually how we talk. And I mean, it's sort of like this amazing tool set, but it's still not quite what I want. Like I still see the difference between what people are doing and what this thing is doing.
Yeah.
Well, it's like a
Yeah.
front end in desperate need of a back end.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't know what time it is.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
once it has access to context, I think in many different ways, it'll probably become more popular or more
Yeah, you want to
powerful.
say like, how can I monetize the cat in the hat, and then say, okay, go do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the picture. Go,
Sounds good.
start the Instagram
Sounds
account.
good.
Let's
Let me
go.
know how much we make. Or wait,
Yeah.
can't say we.
Go ahead and make an Instagram account for
Yeah.
our cat Tony in a hat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I've seen people make lists of things they think it could do in like the conversation design space. So can a bot kind of write itself? Can you ask it to write prompts, and can you ask it to generate training data? And you can't, it will do those things, but it's still not quite like it puts together something passable, but it's still not crafted with the way a human would craft it, right?
Right.
Like, if you're asking, I mean, I've seen people, somebody, I wish I knew who it was, somebody on LinkedIn said, give me 25 different ways to ask this question, and then a question. So you're like sort of asking it to generate, utterances for your training data. And it did it. But to my eye, they were close to the same meaning, but they weren't semantically exactly the same in every case. And like training data is always supposed to come from people. So just because those are, let's say they are grammatically correct and semantically the same, we still don't know if the synonyms, the sentence structures, the language patterns, if all of those are even the ones that real people are using. So
Right.
it's not really giving you high fidelity training data. It's giving you an approximation. And I would argue that I could come up with a more representative set of sample utterances on my own. And mine would be better than ChatGPT because I have 10 years of experience looking at transcripts and sets of data where people have been talking. So like I
Yeah.
still see it's an incredible tool, but it's still like the latest tool in our toolkit is kind of how I feel about it today.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we mentioned this before. It's just, I'm starting to get from people this concept, and I'm seeing it myself, where you read something and they'll say, that seems like ChatGPT wrote it. Like, like we're starting to get a feel for it. People can't quite like boil it down to a formula as to why, but people are starting to get a feel for like that. That feels like ChatGPT wrote it, which means there's some pattern that we're picking up. Now it could just be the prompting, like it just, it could just simply be that, our prompting's so generic and therefore it's writing in a very generic way. But I also think there's something about like if I read your book, after having several conversations with you, I can hear you in those words. Like I can tell you wrote it, and
Mhm.
and had you written it with ChatGPT, I am sure unless somehow you were able to prompt engineer yourself into it, um, which I'm not excluding as a possibility, but I would still get a sense that yeah, it's well written, but it's not you. You aren't in there, and and that the connection to you as a person matters. Like in terms of consuming the content, appreciating the content, like that is an important part of enjoying the content is like my imagination of those words coming out of your mouth, and and behind that the experiences that you have had, and your motivations when you wrote it, like knowing that you're a person who is very focused on wanting to help, low ego. Like now I put that into the words and I realize no, she's not hyperbolic. she's she tends to try to be very honest. Like all of
Mhm.
that is just all between the lines, that just how could it come through in ChatGPT?
Yeah, I love sort of like all the beats of what you were saying. So, like, I have an MFA in fiction writing, and what you do when you get that degree is look at different writers and their writing, and they have a voice. And you break down from a craft perspective what in the words themselves, because it's just words on a page, what in those words is creating the effect. Is it the words they're choosing? Is it their punctuation? Is it the rhythm of their sentences? Is it the length of their phrase? All of those things add up to this effect. And so when people are writing, our voices, our personalities instinctively come through in these choices. Or if it's a book, they're very intentional choices. So that's definitely true. And I think you can ask ChatGPT to change its tone or like say that again but angrier. Like you can ask for those sorts of things and they'll kind of do it. But I think there are a lot of people in the literature world who are playing with ChatGPT and asking it to do those things and kind of looking at, okay, I asked it to be snarky or I asked it to be more serious. What is it? What's changed in these samples? And do I agree that it's more serious? And like, there's some interesting digital humanities stuff happening looking at some of these questions. But I totally love that you also said like when we're reading, especially if it's a book by someone we know or someone we admire or someone we've seen speak before, we are connecting. It is part of our social relationship with that person.
Right.
And I think that's really important. I think humans are connective creatures.
What's
Yeah. And
interesting too with like fiction writing, I feel like the most compelling fiction is generally not predictable. You want it to surprise you in certain ways. And these large language models are prediction machines. So they're kind of creating predictable, in a way, predictable outcomes that are always kind of have this air of mediocrity to them. And I think Rob, you might have shared this article, but I was reading something about how actually like the when it's predicting the next word in a chain, like the one that scores highest is the most likely to appear next is often the one that will produce the most kind of like boring text.
right.
And that sometimes if it goes with a less likely word to come next, all of a sudden it becomes a more interesting response. So I wonder if like predictability is somehow to blame for some of the mediocrity, or like
It is. I
it
mean, it's
not.
built in. That's one of the things that makes GPT for so good is that, it doesn't always take the highest scoring word. That whole temperature setting, you can adjust that, and it starts to, and that's what makes it more interesting. Otherwise, it really is very generic, and you can adjust that. But it just makes me kind of think that we focus a lot on the words and the information in the words that are spoken, or the content itself, right? When I think, if we look back in time, it's not the words or the content that actually matters most. It's the source, who spoke it, and their values, and so just the fact that some machine can produce content and hallucinate, or not. Maybe, like, the optimist in me says it just puts more emphasis on understanding the person behind the words and knowing them, and that we only care about the things spoken by the person we know, and we don't care if they use ChatGPT, so long as they read it and approved it. Like, then we're essentially buying into their values. Like if I read something that you wrote, I would know it was well researched. If I read something that I didn't know the author or had no connection to the author, I can't trust that it was researched at all. Especially now with GPT, I almost can't trust it more, because it might just be sheer making things up. So now we get down to people's personal brand becoming more important if you want to be heard, because they got to get to know you. They got to get to know your values, and then that now we're more interested in the person than the content. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's all really great. I mean, the context of everything matters. Where the information came from
Right.
matters. Like, you're making me think of this really cool example. So yesterday, because I live in New York, I was at the MoMA. I took an afternoon outing and went to the MoMA, which is so lovely. And there was this in the main kind of the main lounge entryway area. There are all these couches, and the wall is several stories high. And on that wall was a huge, I think, an LED screen. And it was showing these ever changing, very three-dimensional looking textures. And they were changing color. It was almost like a digital version of an octopus's skin, like how
Okay.
you watch it change, like not just color but texture and pattern. It was kind of like that on the wall. And it looked beautiful. There was music playing. It was, very like soothing and meditative, and just really arresting. Like, it just grabbed your attention. And then I was reading in the placard all about it, and it was an AI that had been trained on all the digital visual art in the museum, and it was like serving up kind of like an amalgam of all the art that it had seen in the digital collection. And like, that gave it so much more meaning. It was like an ingestion and exhalation of every piece of art in the museum, which is so much more meaningful than a cool octopus skin texture on the wall, which was
Right,
still
right.
beautiful. But like, yeah, knowing what it was made of and what it was kind of reflecting back to us took it from like a pretty thing to like this very artful statement. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think it matters so much.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
That's
as a
tremendous.
writer, how are you finding yourself aligning with this new technology like ChatGPT and generative AI? Like, how do you think it might factor in to your professional life moving forward as you're writing things?
I think it's gonna be real hard to get that pen out of my hand. Like,
Yeah.
there's this writer, Lincoln Michel, who has a really fantastic newsletter. He's a professor and a writer and a really cool person. And his newsletter has been a lot about like AI in the writing space, in an industry perspective, from a creativity perspective. And I think for me, it's like, writing is so essential to my thought process. Like I can't really tell you what I think until I've written about it or if I've bullet pointed about it. Like I very much am like a think in words kind of person. And so writing is my thinking tool. So if I can't write, I'm not even doing the thinking. So I would never, absolutely not. I'm a great writer. I do not want a bot writing for me because
Right.
it doesn't make sense in my world. But I am a person who has a gift in writing and I have a lot of training in writing. Writing is very painful for lots of people. Like they don't feel confident about it or they have they're neurodivergent and it's a real struggle to get started, or people have dyslexia. I mean, there's all these kinds of reasons why writing is very hard. And I don't think it's the case that like we should be struggling through making our own drafts just for the sake of the thing. But for me personally, I'm like, writing is mine. And
Yeah, you should hammer it out on a typewriter with two fingers.
yeah, chisel it in stone. Think about every word. Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty attached to writing, but I don't think everybody has to be.
Yeah, I feel the same way, but I do see the beauty in people who feel excluded by the act of writing, or they're not confident enough to express their ideas that way, to all of a sudden have agency to share their ideas. I think that's pretty powerful.
Totally.
Rob and I were talking too about the writer strike with the Writers Guild that's happening right now, and kind of what should they be banging on the table for? What should they be fighting against? What should they be asking for? Because it seems likely that generative AI will come into play in some way,
Yeah.
in the
Yeah. Are they
production, film,
wrestling
and
tools out
TV.
of their own hands? Is that like, are they like, we can't use these, or is it okay for writers to use it so long as it's a writer? But if you're not a writer, you can't use it. So you need a writer's license to use ChatGPT.
It's really interesting. I mean, I don't know a ton about it because I don't do writing in like the film and TV and screenwriting world, but it does seem like there's some specific stuff in their contract about not using AI to take their jobs. And so I would just kind of look to people in the industry, like the people who are actually striking and putting their income on the line to
Yeah,
push back on this. But it's sort of interesting because, like, let's say we had a bunch of AI generated scripts, and then we took writers and had them like fix them up, or choose the best one to move forward with. The meaning is still being like, where the meaning is coming from is the person reading the scripts, right? And the person interacting with the scripts. So it's sort of like it doesn't make sense to me to use that as your creative process. Why don't we let the writers do what they like literally been trained to do, and they have like incredible collaborative and decision making powers to like make the story that people are trying to tell. It's sort of like, I think of it like playing apples to apples. Do you know this game?
yeah,
Where you lay down, there's a card, and then everybody picks a card, and like it's really usually very funny because of in jokes and all the all these like funny things, but like the cards are pre-existing, but the funniness happens when the contrast or the resonance of what people are choosing. And
yeah.
it's fun for a game, but like that's not the way that you would like write a movie, by like letting the AI kind of mash up some things together. Like there's just something about it that feels like that's not how you make art.
Well, I was
Although,
Yeah.
listening to an interview with Paul Schrader. He wrote screenplays for like Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, and he's directed a bunch of films. And he made the point that AI could write probably a really good CSI script, but it would have a hell of a time trying to write a Paul Schrader script. And I guess that gets back to the idea we were talking about, where it's tangled up in the source. It's like, where is this story coming from? And I think what's compelling about art and movies is that the stories are coming from human experience. They're not coming from a giant cauldron full of everything that's been thrown up on the
Yeah.
internet.
Also, when it
yeah.
comes to like movies and television and motion picture art, it's writing is one aspect. It's a critical aspect, but it's one aspect. And so if you have like unbelievable visual effects and great acting and characters and great set design and all of the other things, and then you have mediocre writing, you can still have an entertaining, you know, product. But then you just like, as you like chip away at each one of those disciplines and kind of normalize in each one, taking the art out of it, it's going to add up to a just very bland experience. And so, you know, writers looking just specifically at writing and feeling threatened, it sort of makes sense because they're saying like, look, as long as the other pieces stay in place, we're threatened by AI because these other pieces, if they're great, could still make for entertaining television or movies. But if you look at it from the other side, which is the movie making side, they're probably more incentivized to start using AI for like visual effects, the more expensive things, right, than writing. and and so if this is the road they're going to take, it doesn't make a lot of sense because if they're going to do it to writing, they're definitely going to do it to the more expensive things like special effects and set design and all of these other things. Actors, you know, who makes more, actors or writers? Like, I don't think anybody has a question there. So you know, it's almost like writing is the least big opportunity that studios have in a way, and that if they start going after this stuff, you know, it's more likely it's going to hit those other areas. It just hasn't quite hit but it's right around the corner. I mean, visual effects for sure. I mean, they're talking about implementing it very quickly. So yeah, it's. I think there's still that. We had Seth Godin on, and it was like, I asked him the question. I didn't quite get I think a clean answer out of him, but like, can an AI create a purple cow? And it's this idea, like, I don't know if you're familiar with his whole purple cow thing, but
I don't think so.
Okay, it's just it's a great book. It's great marketing example of like I'm going to bastardize this because it's been so long since I read it, but it's basically the idea that a farmer paints a cow purple, and now everybody driving by is like, oh my God, did you see the purple cow? Like, just that's all you needed to do, right? You needed to make something remarkable, and what made us all talk about the purple cow, right, is the fact that you've never seen a purple cow before. It's like this unusual, and the question was like, is AI, given that it's like digested all the normal things we see, is it going to come up with the purple cow concept? Because it's these are unusual surprises, unexpected ideas, essentially things that haven't been written before, and it's those surprises around each corner that make us laugh, make us entertained, you know.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I'm trying to tease apart these things because there's a bunch of different things that have been like resonating throughout our whole conversation. So like, I do think that it is possible for AI to accidentally come up with something really funny or cool, but it's in that apples to apples way where like it accidentally gave us a contrast. It gave us a purple cow, but who's laughing from the cow and who's the one who recognized that a purple cow is funny? It's not the cow. It's us, right? Like the meaning,
Right.
we're still the meaning owners and havers. And then like this tension of like, to get back to what you were saying about, it would be okay for AI to come up with like a script like a CSI, or like I watch Law and Order SVU, that's to the minute. Okay, body here. This is the wrong person because it's at minute 3. Like, there are a couple structures for the show. So there's sort of almost a difference between like a commodified show or like a show where the pleasure is its consistency or its familiarity, or like these beats are familiar to us, versus like, I don't know, there's this movie that came out called Women Talking. It came out last year, and it was like really amazing and really singular and like pretty strange, but also not. And like something like that gets to excellence when like every single decision, like you're saying, the words in the script, the way the actor is saying them, the facial expressions they're making, the shots, the way the shot is taken, the lighting, the costume, like all of that, every single decision is adding up to the same creative vision. That's how you get like something excellent, something artful. And that's what people love. Like people love Succession, and people love Breaking Bad, and people, all these shows, they're excellent, and they're excellent because of this, all the decisions being in alignment across the team to add up to the vision. And like,
Right.
I don't see AI really helping any parts of that process.
Right, and it's a
It
surprise,
feels like
right?
the
Like
path.
you got word prediction is literally the idea that it's not going to surprise you, right? Like the algorithm is meant to not surprise you. Like that's what they're trying to do, to find the next most likely word that should come after this batch of words. So it's like in a sense designed to not surprise. And to your point, like, hey, purple cow, you said, well, I bet you the cow didn't think it was very funny. And, but if I said, I bet the farmer didn't think it was very funny, like, which one's funnier? Right? Like, the cow not thinking it was very funny is funnier than the farmer not thinking it was very funny. How would AI, like, who decides that, right? The person has to decide that. And who would come up with that? Not AI, because it doesn't understand that a cow standing there purple, like we just anthropomorphize the cow. Like so much just happened in our brain to make that funny, right?
Totally. And if the cow was gray, it wouldn't be funny. And
Right.
we get why that is. Our instinctive level. It's like,
I think one of the points that Seth makes in that book too is that the purple cow also is sort of emblematic of a truly remarkable product. And so to kind of tie in what we were talking about with movie making, which I think also applies to experience design and some of the processes that Rob and I outline in our book, is that having that shared vision around like what the end product should look and feel like, combining that with AI that's being sequenced with other technology so that you can create these like hyper personalized experiences. Then in that way, maybe AI does play a part in creating these purple cows, but I don't think it's likely to be. I mean, it could be a hiccup where it's just something funny. I mean, to me, some of the hallucinations that I get out of ChatGPT are the most interesting things that I see it doing, and like I like screwing around with image generating tools and trying to feed them really bad prompts and trying to get like really kind of horrifying, strange pictures out of it, just by it not being able to fill in the gaps. But I think if it's part of that kind of concerted effort where there's a shared vision guiding all the disciplines that need to usher it in, then maybe that's how it makes a purple cow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's more like a brainstorming tool than it is an output.
But there are lots of, I mean, it's very sophisticated, but there are lots of brainstorming tools. Like Apples to Apples is a brainstorming tool in a way. I mean, there's also artists who have explored exactly this concept of like, there's a group of writers, French and European writers in, I think, the 60s called the Oulipo writers, who were the early like people experimenting with like computer generated stories and poems, or just like playing with the idea of constraints, and also doing things like making physical books there's a book called, it's like 100 million stories or something like that, and the title's in French, but I'm not gonna dig up my old French pronunciation on this podcast. But the book was a bunch of poems, all 12 lines each. And then there were like, there's like 100 of them, and they're stacked up and they're cut so that you can flip the tabs and really make
Oh
any
yeah.
combination, like make a new poem. So the book actually contains like
Oh,
whatever it
right,
is,
right, right. Yeah.
100 million poems. And some of those poems sound like incredibly meaningful and poignant, and some of them sound kind of arbitrary. And again, the beauty of that book is that it very explicitly helps you understand that the meaning is on your side. Like,
Yeah.
makes this poem beautiful and this poem arbitrary is all of that discernment is within you. So like there's lots of art already
Right.
exploring this concept, or even like the fountain, the guy who this is so embarrassing, I don't know his name. The guy who took the urinal and called it the fountain. Like,
Oh yeah.
the art is in the contrast.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but that all comes from kind of the viewer, the listener, the reader's side. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I've been
In that sense, I think it's an interesting tool, but it's not the only tool we have in that toolkit either.
Yeah.
yeah. I've been trying to reread Naked Lunch, the William S. Burroughs book, and he would do that. He would like cut up
His
big
cut-ups, yeah.
hunks of text and just kind of rearrange things. And it wasn't like he was necessarily searching for meaning. And I think I heard Patti Smith talking about his process and how, someone was asking her like, well, what does it mean? And her answer was like, well, he didn't really want it to mean anything. He just liked the way it sounded
Yeah.
and like what it kind of conjured. And like Rob and I've had discussions too that like a piece of art in some ways isn't really complete until it's digested by someone else. Like if you paint a painting in private and no one ever sees it, is it really art? But then once someone else sees it and it conjures whatever magic
Yeah.
in their head, then that's when the process is sort of completed.
Yeah, it comes down to that Marshall McLuhanism, the concept that even watching film at 24 frames per second, it's clear that our brains are filling in the frames. Like that's why we see the smooth motion, right? And so the thought process behind it is even if something is high resolution as film, still half of the movie we're inventing in our minds. So half of it we've created, half of it, somebody else authored. So every piece of art we complete, and therefore every piece of art is both ours and the artist's, right? And so the more low resolution the art is, like abstract paintings, the more we contribute to the final product when we view it, and therefore it isn't finalized until we see it, until the end person sees it, and it manifests differently with each person. So the art is like this, what I'll say is like asynchronous in that I created an abstract painting and then put it up, and then each person creates a new painting as they look at it, right? And adds meaning, versus synchronous, which is like now we're having a conversation and we're making art together in real time, which I just find super fascinating, as we think about the fact that, like, and I won't get too deep into this, but the idea that human connectivity might just be co-creation, like that just might simply be the substance of what connectivity is. When we talk about connecting with somebody and we're like, but what is that? It's just simply co-creating, because if you and I were both repeating the same words in every conversation every day, would we be enjoying our day, right? And the answer is, I think, clearly no. And so this idea that, that we're inventing in real time and that we're co-creating, like this podcast is a co-creation, right? Three of us kind
Yeah.
of co-creating this. And that's what, as humans, we sort of thrive on and live for. And that, yeah, this, I don't know, I think I just drifted us way into Never Never Land, so
But I think that kind of explains like what we were talking about at the beginning with like our over eagerness to anthropomorphize or to connect more deeply with conversational interfaces might stem from just that we think or identify subconsciously with conversation as like a real force of creation with other people, not just connectivity, but also you're creating something, whether even if
Yeah.
it is like fleeting, you know.
Yeah. Even with ChatGPT, I don't enjoy co-creating with it. What I enjoy is sharing it with other people. Like the first thing I do when it does something is I take it to a person. I say, check out what it
Yeah.
did, right? And that's actually where I'm most entertained by it. Not you know not just
Yeah.
doing it with it, but the first thing when it does something like you just shared with us. You're you know, it created a SWOT analysis, and then
Mhm.
he shared it with you, and you shared it with us, and what was more fun, the doing it or the sharing, right? Like that's the first instinct we have is to go share it with an actual person, not with
Totally.
Yeah.
another bot.
Yeah. And I do really like kind of culminating this conversation, culminating in this idea of co-creation. Um, because what I think I agree with that wholeheartedly. Like co-creation is how we get to growth. Like in a relationship, you're co-creating your relationship together and like challenging each other and trying to be good people as often as you can. And
Right.
or when you think about like art and discourse, like participating in art, writing a book, you're like writing your book and you're kind of having this discourse with your readers, but it's broken up over space and time, but it's still co-creation. Even if you never hear from your readers, like you're participating in this meaning making activity together. And yeah, I think that is a really good way to crystallize why I feel not a lot of people think I'll be really enthusiastic about ChatGPT, and I'm sort of like, okay, all
Right.
right,
Yeah.
it's here. Sure, it's cool, but I don't feel like a burning passion to like participate with it and like do so much stuff with it because I just like people better than AI. People are more
Mhm.
interesting to me than AI most of the
Right. Yeah. And you could argue the people that do enjoy it probably just enjoy the part of sharing it afterwards, and that it's a
Yeah,
means to an end, you know?
Well,
totally.
maybe our roles should, in some part, be to make sure that people continue to be more interested in people than they are AI. I mean, we were kind of talking about ways to make AI less human, make it maybe almost a little more bland, so that, I mean, Rob and I have talked about the idea of the conversational interface kind of being a holy grail in UX terms, right? Because it's a truly frictionless interface, and it also, more than any other interface, can really slip into the background if you let it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I think the whole hallucination thing, like the one of the things that's undeniable is mutation is a big part of evolution, right? And that means babies die, right? Um, and and for evolution that might be okay, and it can get away with it, but not in our world where customers get spoken to in really rude ways or insulted because the machine's just experimenting with different words to see which word might improve. And I think anytime you're talking about, surprising people, which is really about keeping something interesting, you're talking about taking risks and chances you know, with just throwing different words in there and seeing what happens and getting a reaction from people, negative or positive. And it seems like we're trying to tone this down, right? That's what alignment is all about. It's the reinforced learning by humans to like not experiment. So maybe all the stuff that's happening now is to even make it more and more bland and more boring. and and that's okay. Like we're cool with that. Like that's our job anyway. That's what we want to do. So maybe we're on the right track. Maybe there's an argument to say like we're in order to reach alignment and to reduce risk in liability, we have to make it boring, and that's okay.
Yeah, people have tweeted about this and made jokes about this, but like in the 1950s when they would talk about AI, the like promise of AI was that we could, and automation in general, is that we can take all the boring tasks out of people's hands so that people can make art and participate in art and, have these like lives that are full of these other things, these wonderful things, right? But now it's like, oh, but like it seems like they want to use the AI to make the art. So then what? Like, where's
Yeah. Wait, I'm confused. I
where
thought
does
that
it
was our job.
to lives that we were
Yeah.
promised?
Yeah. Now we get to the player piano book where he's like, we're gonna have AI so we can all get fat and sit on our couch, and then die of obesity. Like,
Yeah, or just
yeah.
or watch, commodified TV shows
Yeah, the,
until
the TV show that never ends because it just generates in front of you.
And it stars you, and you're living out all the things that you had hoped you would do before you got stuck to your couch, I guess.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we're diving headfirst into the Matrix right now.
Yeah, this is getting really dark.
Oh,
Well, to bring it back to design, have you gotten the sense that ChatGPT and other large language models are pushing conversational design into a more prominent role within the broader experience design world?
I see a couple different takes. One of them is I see everybody at big companies, their leadership want them to figure out what to do with ChatGPT. And everybody's going, do you know? Do you know? I don't know how this fits into our process. I also think that the main issue right now is like it's large language models don't have any kind of truthiness guarantee. And
Hmm.
so, you can't really, you still need people heavily involved in these processes. So there's this sort of like people trying to figure out what we're doing with this stuff. There are people who are like, oh, well, conversation design just totally changed because now you can get a bot to write its own, you can get ChatGPT to write the prompts and generate the training data. So actually, conversation designers have nothing to do. And my response to that is like, those are things that I do, but they're the means to the end of my job. My job is to figure out what people are doing, what the technology can and should be doing, and get the conversation working successfully. So whatever tech stack I'm working with, even if I'm not writing the prompts and I'm not doing, the training data is being handled in like a pretty different way, I'm still a user experience designer of conversations. And then most practically, I see people trying to use it to make the parts. Like, can it write our prompts? Can it have a hand in the training data? Those seem like interesting explorations to me. I would put a lot of constraints on how I think that should be used. But I do think that very practically, our worlds actually involve a ton of writing. Like, how many emails, how many times,
Hmm.
I don't see any real problems in using these tools to assist us with our
Yeah.
with our
yeah.
tasks. So that's kind of the three-part way that I'm seeing it unfold in the industry.
Yeah, I went through a bit of a cycle where I was like, oh wait, because you sit down, you write, let's say you write a dialogue between the machine and a person, kind of old school IVR or whatever you want to call it, right? Like it'll say this, then they'll say this, and then it'll say this, sort of like screenwriting, right? And then I thought, oh my God, this is like all gonna change. And then I sat down and I realized, actually, I just replace what the machine says with the prompt. Like, I'm not like literally writing the response anymore, but I am writing and engineering the prompt, and it really doesn't feel much different. It's just less literal, and I'm just giving it more guidance, and I'm just like, okay, here's the prompt. So, so the prompt engineering, which, you know, I almost feel like there's a word that's gonna probably mess with us is engineering, like that's gonna throw all the writers off and say, "Oh, not my job." Like, "Oh no, please don't run away from this. It's very much so your job." Um,
Yeah.
you know,
And like the what's interesting is that like people should be talking to me about how to design their algorithms because a bot can write a bot can write and give me an intro for a chat bot who does this, right? Like a bot
right.
can write something like that. But when I give like a 3-hour talk on prompt writing, and it's like just scratching the surface, a good prompt for like a true conversational bot, like for a service bot, for example, has all these things it's trying to accomplish. It's trying to communicate the personality. It's trying to use plain language. There's specific sentence structures that are lower cognitive load than others. There are we would place information and organize the information across the sentence in certain ways. So like right now, ChatGPT can't do that, and I can. If you're trying to make an algorithm that actually does that, talk to me, because I can tell you what those things are that the algorithms should be trying to emulate, right? So there's maybe some layers there in the future of like, oh, if these algorithms are getting really smart and really good and they're actually producing high quality things for specific use cases, that's pretty compelling.
Yeah, it's like customizing the model for the task, not this whole idea of general intelligence might just be a red herring. Like, no, we need specific models to do specific things, just like, rules and designed, and then it's more about sequencing these things and getting them to work together than creating one uber intelligent algorithm that can, suit any circumstance, from writing dialogue to, getting our internet back up and running with Comcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what's like most exciting in some ways about GPT isn't that it can write essays; it's that it's a really fluid conversational interface. It shows how dynamic it can be and how natural it can be for people to communicate with something. So once it's able to provide context and it's connected to an ecosystem where software is being automated and stuff, then I think it starts to get more interesting and maybe starts to look more like Rob and I are big fans of the movie Her, the way they kind of handled conversational AI, I suppose, in that sense, where he would talk to it and type with it, but sometimes the OS would show him pictures. It was context. Sometimes it would show him something on a screen over there, but it was all kind of multimodal, and it was just this experience, this tapestry that kind of ran through his day.
Yeah, not as excited as we are with the movie Galaxy Quest, though, where aliens had sucked down this like television show. I don't know. Have you seen Galaxy Quest?
No, I haven't.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
The aliens like study, like basically transcribe all of our, like this. It's like Star Trek, really, is what. Like, I think of all episodes of Star Trek, then learned our language from it and learned everything, and then came down to Earth because they thought it was a documentary about the truth, and that we could, that this group of individuals could save their planet. So they find the cast. It's pretty funny. Anyway.
Oh man. Okay, I love that. And what's that movie where it's aliens, but the heroine of the movie is a linguist?
Oh, that's The Arrival? I think,
Yeah.
Amy Adams.
Exactly.
I always think like
That's a really good one.
is really like the alien that's sucked down all the words from the internet, learned our language, and then now like talks to us, right? And
everyone thinks that all the things are true. Like in Galaxy Quest, the aliens they've built this spaceship replica from the show, but they don't know how to use it.
Right.
Which is sort of where we are.
Yeah.
And fun fact, Rob actually worked second unit, right, in the audio department on Galaxy Quest?
That was like my last on my way out,
Cool. Now, this is making me want to use it. It feels like there's a couple of different analogies in there for we're using. It's like, is the AI the aliens? Are we the aliens?
Who's the aliens in all of this?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Then there's the idea that like this around. I guess it was a little before ChatGPT came out. There's confirmation that unidentifiable flying objects exist. They might not necessarily be aliens, but for some reason that made less of an impact than ChatGPT. I think people were way more blown away by that than confirmation that there are things flying around that we don't know what they are.
I had forgotten about that, but you're totally right. It was like dozens of strange things happening. Maybe ChatGPT is just a government conspiracy to distract us from the fact that aliens got here last summer.
Yeah.
Government's a lot smarter than I thought they were, though.
And now you sound like ChatGPT because that's not correct. So
they still can't figure out how to get rid of inflation without having us all like lose our jobs. So it's hard to imagine they could thread that needle. But yeah, this has been great. I don't know if,
Yeah, we really appreciate you taking the time, Rebecca. It's been a lot of fun. I feel like it's a
Absolutely.
conversation that we could just continue some other time too.
yeah,
Absolutely. This is excellent co-creation, and I really appreciate you asking me to be here. And I really love these conversations that, are centered in our industry, but reach out into these other like important, I would say more important parts of human existence, like art and connection. So I
yeah,
have really enjoyed this conversation.
yeah.
That's
In
great.
our little echo chamber, we get to go out every once in a while and see what's really happening in the world.
Yep,
Hmm.
yep. And we made some beautiful art together.
Perfect. I love it.
All right. Thanks again for joining us on another episode of Invisible Machines. Be sure to subscribe to UX Magazine wherever you get your podcasts so you can hear new episodes as they are released. You should also subscribe and like the Invisible Machines YouTube channel. Big thank you to everyone at UX Magazine for your support in making this podcast, especially our producer Kate Timchenko, who has done an amazing job booking some fantastic guests. Thank you also to our executive producer, Elias Parker, who has also done a lot of work booking some pretty incredible guests for this show. And thank you, as always, to the OneReach.ai marketing team and our video editor, Mike Litvinov, for making this podcast look and sound wonderful. We will see you again next week right here on Invisible Machines.